So good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well and can hear me from your side. Welcome to today's webinar with First Technology and First Digital. We're living in interesting times, and with the crisis we're facing today, we're forced to rethink how teams collaborate remotely and more effectively. How our teams continue with business as usual is both, I guess you could say, an art and a science these days. But essentially, we need to continue using good practices within our product development teams, but also we need to leverage and use the collaboration tools that are available to us today. And as we know, there are a number of powerful tools out there that can support us in our efforts. But I think in today's session, we'll be looking at how we can continue to implement projects remotely, keeping business as usual, which is important these days, but also how you can still initiate new projects remotely using a good delivery model. So let's get into it. Firstly, in terms of the webinar today, if you're probably familiar with this by now, working remotely from home, but please ask questions using the Q&A box that you can see on your side. I'll facilitate those questions as they come through. And also just a request, if you wouldn't mind filling in the survey after the webinar, which you will receive in an email, thanking you for attending today. And we'll certainly use that as feedback into our sessions, and also feedback in terms of what new topics you would like to hear about in the future. So with that said, let me introduce you to the First Digital team. So Belinda, if you wouldn't mind, there we go. Okay, so first of all, I'm Scott Beattie. I'm responsible for the Western Cape business for First Digital. And with me, I have Belinda and Jasmine, who will both be sharing some great insights into how we as First Digital are using Devops to facilitate remote development today. And in addition, we'll give you a view of how you can use a tool like Azure Devops as an example to support you, which is one of the many productivity tools and collaboration tools that that one can consider, and which you might be using today already. So with that, good morning, ladies. Before we move on, though, a quick punt just with regards to First Digital. From a First Digital point of view, we are nationally based, Cape Town, Johannesburg, as well as Durban. We are all developers, essentially, within the Microsoft space traditionally, so well geared around assisting you with your business. So with that, I will hand over to Belinda. And I guess to kick off, Belinda, if I can before I hand over, is just maybe a good question to ask to start off the session is really, maybe you could just help everybody understand how First Digital today use DevOps practices in remote development.
Hi, yes, thanks. Hello, everybody. We still use the Agile methodology with DevOps practices. And DevOps is actually just a culture that you install into your Agile methodology. We use the Scrum framework. It's still sprints and stand-ups, and the DevOps it focuses mainly on business, customer, resource focused. That is what the practice is bringing to your normal Agile development. It's just a continuation on Agile, a mindset, a culture in the company that's changing, where development now is expanding by including operations and testing, QA testing into the team. Agile would typically have them separately, and most companies are still set up like that, where operations and QA is separate divisions. And you, after developing Agile, you will just deploy to QA tests, and you have that bugs coming into a new sprint whenever QA is done, and deploys, operations will deploy whenever the UAT has been done. So what DevOps then actually just did is says, okay, there's a gap here. We're having a little bit of a disconnect. So let's move operations into our development cycle within the sprints and QA as well. So when we start sprinting, we will develop, and I will discuss that in another slide. But when we start sprinting, we work in synergy together, and everyone works together, and everyone knows by using the stand-ups what's happening in the sprint cycle. So in a nutshell, that is how Agile, Scrum, and DevOps works together.
So that's great, Belinda. So, I mean, just understanding that now, how do organizations get to this point? How do project teams, get to this point? Where does it start, I guess, is the question with regards to new initiatives, new product development projects that are kicking off. I guess, from, there's obviously business requirements that come into play and are gathered, and we need to manage that remotely now. How does that feed into the methodology and the practice and the way we need to manage this work?
Yeah, Scott, I'm glad you're asking that question, because I think with business or potential customers, that is a concern of how do we continue getting requirements from business, managing those requirements, and getting that product developed without that human interaction. And it happens exactly like it would happen in a human interaction way. As you can see now, we have a video, and we can see each other, we can interact with each other. I can see what you're saying and what your facial expressions are. So it's no different to being in a boardroom with someone. So we still do the requirements management by starting off the project kickoff, where we do the requirements gathering with business on a Teams site now, video calling, still explaining on boards. Teams has wonderful apps where you can still explain and get the message across of what your requirement is. So then we would do a baseline BRS, and from the baseline BRS, the product owner will do the analysis, maybe ask a couple of questions via Teams call or an email or whatever the medium would be, and then write epics and put that on the backlog. So 2 weeks before the sprint actually commences, then the requirements validation session with business will be scheduled. We will have another, because we're running Agile, so requirements can change from the BRS baseline, or it can just be adapted, or it can be grown out, because we have time to think about it. Now people come back to this for validation and say, I thought about this requirement, we don't really need it, or we need to change it. And this is why we have that second checkpoint before we commence with the sprint. So 1 week before the sprint starts, the product owner and the team lead will get together, team lead / architect, we will get together, we will refine that backlog with the epics and features and user stories. We'll assign priorities to it, and we will add more user stories to the backlog as we unpack this baseline and after this 2-week sprint check-in with business. 1 week before the sprint, the team lead / architect will do technical backlog refinement, where he will look at the user stories that a product owner like myself would have added. We've had our discussion, and this is where he defines and he designs and he looks at the technical side and he adds that to the backlog as well. And then on the first day of sprints, I will explain the sprint structure to you on the latest slide. On the first day of sprint, you will sit with the team where we have the backlog refining, backlog grooming session, and the team will add tasks with the this team lead, and everyone knows what's going on the backlog. Day 2, we start development. So on this, I would just have to highlight that when we do this sprint grooming or the backlog grooming session, the team member has a say in the task, and he can say how long that task would typically take. So if he, for instance, says, oh no, this task's going to take me 2 hours, we put an estimate of 2 hours on the task, and then that's sort of a commitment of how long it will take. It can change, and that's why we always insist that they would then put the time allocation of the actual time on the, that's just a side note, time allocation on that task. And that is how we manage the requirements. I will talk about on the sprint structure, how we have our regular check-ins with business to let them know how the requirements are going. Thanks.
So maybe you mentioned backlog refinement and backlog grooming. Maybe give us a little bit more detail around that aspect.
Yeah, so backlog grooming or backlog refinement, where it's just evolved to now a different word, is literally the list, a to-do list that's going onto a tool like Azure Devops. And if you look at the depiction that I have there on the right, is that you have different type of inputs that you will put the epics, the features, the user stories, or the tasks that will be written by myself, product owner, will be written by team members, and it will be written by the team leads. Depending on what your role is and where in the sprint cycle is, we will add stuff to the backlog. And then that's called the product backlog. And then once we've decided what will go into a sprint backlog, we will allocate from the product backlog to the sprint backlog, and that is what will be developed in that sprint. So that is what the backlog is. It's actually just a to-do list, and we have two different spaces where the backlog is held. So we have the global backlog, with a big backlog, where we just add stuff as we go that we can then choose to allocate to different sprints. So that's the backlog in a nutshell.
Okay, that's great. And if we just talk about a sprint plan and maybe just get a view of what a sprint plan, a typical sprint plan would look like. There we go. You know, and how long are the sprints, and which resources form part of those sprints?
So typically a sprint plan will also depend on the company you are sprinting with and the type of team you would be having in the sprints. Some companies like shorter sprints, like we do in FD, traditionally will do a 10-day sprint where it's five days in 1 week and 5 days in the other week. So it's 2-week sprints, working days. And then we will do sort of the structure you see there would be day 1, where we do the sprint planning, where we get everyone together to discuss the backlog so everyone knows in the team. And then the day 2 to get development commences, and it goes on to day 7, and then we have 1 or 2 days testing, where that's developer testing. The developers do documented peer testing, and that also goes on the backlog. It's attached to that user story that we write that says testing, peer testing, and it's attached to that so that we can always refer back to that. And then on day 10, we deploy to QA. And then QA starts their cycle and they do their testing. And on day 10, we will also have scheduled production deployments. That is then in the cycle where we deploy to prod after UAT has tested and UAT has had the approval from business. And then in the typical team we would put together would obviously be your developers. You operationally, sometimes you have developers, in some instances, I would have developers that we re-rotate on support, maintenance, and releases, so that the developers are all cross-skilled. Everyone can do a release, everyone can do the maintenance and support on the product that they've delivered, and then we develop. So that also has a ripple effect on the quality of development that would typically then come out. Because if in one sprint you develop, in the next sprint you have to support and fix bugs and maintain that code that you pushed out in the previous sprint or someone else's, the relationship between the developers becomes so well, that the code gets better and the bugs gets less, and QA that's also then in the mix there, the bugs gets out quicker, and we can deploy a much better quality to production where we have minimal bugs. And yes, I know everyone says no, there won't be no minimal bugs, but yes, we have. This is a proven thing. It's been working quite well this way. So this is very in line with the Scrum framework that we're using with DevOps principles, and obviously the agile way of doing with it, where the requirements are changeable. And then we have the QA testers. QA hands over to UAT. UAT doesn't sit in the DevOps team. UAT is traditionally a business function where the end users start testing the functionalities and then just log bugs as well if they find something functionally or look and feel that they're not happy with. That will then also go back onto a backlog list, and then we prioritize when to fix that in a next sprint, or if it's urgent, we put it into a current sprint. And then obviously the other team member is the product owner. So in the, I just need to mention as well, under the developers, we always allocate a team lead into a team. So we might have in bigger development teams, we might have running one sprint, but multiple teams on the sprint doing maybe different technology stacks or different components, working on different components. It just depends on how big the project is and how many developers we have available and how many resources or expertise we can group into groups. That is when we have like quick product implementations where we need to have big groups, and we can then still run smaller teams, 5 to 6 in a team with the team lead, and the product owner will typically have maybe someone assisting where we can have stuff continuously going onto the backlog with business. So this is a very nice structure that FD is running. And then another thing I want to explain is that in sprint we always start with a sprint 0. Sprint 0 is where we set up the backlog boards, we compile the teams through technologies and marry them, because we will know upfront what technologies we're using. We just set up the sprint team, everyone gets familiar. We still have that first day, we have that backlog grooming session, but that would be different backlog that we put on there. We still task it. We will say, set up Azure Devops board, do this, do this, do this. And that would still be like transparent to the client, where the client or the customer can see, what have we done in sprint 0? How are we commencing with this? And in sprint 0, the product owner will say, loading backlog. And that would be tasks that we all need to close. And that's how we commence with our sprinting.
That's great, Linda. So you mentioned something around, obviously, being transparent with customers, and I guess, we as First Digital, we do typically work remotely for a lot of customers today. Some customers we have traditionally worked on site, and things obviously changed. But maybe just talk to how exactly remote development teams can typically work, and how do we monitor that remote development? How do we manage that, the processes and the delivery now that we are all disconnected? We're not in an office. We're not talking to each other directly. How does that look? And maybe just talk to that through your slides.
So Scott, for us at FD, nothing has changed. We've been working like this for the longest time, certainly since I've been joining FD. Even if I was on client site, we would use our tools and we would be sitting next to each other and we all would join in a Teams meeting. It's just easier. We record stuff, but I'll get to the detail of the collaboration tools in a later slide. But it just, nothing really changed for us. We've been doing this for the longest time, and that is why it's so comfortable for us to do business as usual and take on new projects and still continue with development quite comfortably. The developers right up to product owners, project managers, business unit managers, everyone has this already waxed and we have the discipline and the product is moving. So I just want to explain the different types of remote development that we can sort of do for a typical customer coming into us and saying, we need you to develop this product for us, but it's remote. So how do we get the synergy right? So remote virtual development is what FD does. We work maybe from the FD office, or it's home-based, or we draw from expertise all over the three offices we have: Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg, and we have those subject matter experts or technology specialists, and we all work together as a team, even though it's totally virtual. And then we can do the outsourced development team, where a customer would definitely come to us and say, outside of our in-house team, you guys need to operate totally on your own. We will get the requirements to you, and you just carry on and develop and deploy, and we test, and that's just totally outsourced. And then you have an incorporated development team, where your customer says, I want you guys to form part of my team. I have a small team, or I have a team, but I need extra and we need to get this product done quicker. And we can just be an extension of the customer's in-house development team. And we all work together on the projects that is then as one. Obviously then falling into their sprint teams, falling into their methodology of that, how they would be working. And when we do this remote development working, there are a couple of checks in place to monitor, and not just, I don't want to use the word monitor, because it sounds like we're like micromanaging, and that's not it. Our team is very, very disciplined. So work comes out by looking at, first of all, I want to mention that trust and support is key. In the DevOps methodology, the DevOps practice sort of code of conduct, is that trust and support of your team is a key component of DevOps. So we have daily team stand-ups, or scrums, if you will, where we would have these check-ins every morning at a certain time. It's scheduled throughout our sprints. We will have a check-in where the Scrum Master, typically not the product owner, someone else in the team acts as a Scrum Master. In my instances, in my teams, I like to have the team lead be the Scrum Master, but we elect someone, maybe in 4 or 5 sprints, someone else gets a chance to be the Scrum Master. Then we have the board up in front of us, the Azure DevOps boards, where we would look at what have you done, what is closed, and what is your impediments? Why is it not closed? So we will have that discussion in the stand-ups, and then we move on. And this afternoon, we'll have a quick check-in just to say, is everyone still on track? Is everyone still okay? Is there anything we need to note? Get information to you, and then the next day, we have another stand-up. So the team lead and the product owner works very closely together. We have check-ins on the backlog. We discuss resource impediments, or if we need to we plan ahead. If we need to get a typical resource in for something that's going to happen in a sprint down the line, we plan that with our department that does the resource planning, and we get that on board so long so that resource will know when they need to slot into our sprints. And then we also have where the product owner and the business unit manager would regularly meet on the status quo of the project and discuss resources, not HR related issues, but resourcing as to the needs of the project and the product. And if I have any impediments, or if the product owner has any impediments, we'll discuss it there, and we'll find solutions to the project impediment. We use Azure DevOps as well for monitoring, because we build dashboards onto Azure DevOps, which we monitor. We have management dashboards, which we build for business. Business can monitor progress on those dashboards. They can log in at any time, look at the progress on the dashboard. And typically these dashboards will have statistics on of how is the sprint burn down going? How many tasks, how many user stories are being closed? How many tasks are being closed? Are we behind? Are we ahead? And we also use those statistics to plan the next sprint. So that would indicate to us if we are overestimating the amount of user stories in one sprint, we will then look at it and say, oh, statistically over the past 2 sprints, we had too many user stories in, we maybe should reduce it because we are getting bugs that we need to also fix. So we will constantly gauge how much we will allocate to a sprint. And then the productivity statistics will obviously also then go to management and people that manage HR, so that they can see how the resource and if the resource needs any more assistance and upskilling, and the team lead will also check these statistics coming from Azure Devops to see where he needs to lend some help. It's taking too long to close tasks. You know, can I help you somewhere, or some upskilling is maybe required, and that's how we gauge that. So monitoring productivity, I don't want to call it monitoring, I will just say let's facilitate productivity.
That's great, and so I guess tools and applications and all very particular to how teams and want to work and how individuals like to work. So obviously getting into that now, it'll be great if you can just elaborate on that, and then I believe Jasmine's going to jump in and also just show us an Azure DevOps board with regards to a live project that we are currently managing today.
Okay, yeah, so Azure DevOps Server was previously called TFS. And now all the functions that TFS previously have done is now just Azure DevOps and more. So you can use Azure DevOps to do version control, reporting, requirement management, which is that backlog list is your requirement management. Project management is where you could see the pipelines, when do we need to. So you have an overall view of the inputs that you put into Azure DevOps. You have an overall view of how your project's going. You will still use your project budgets. You will still use your sort of timelines and all of that you do on on projects. You can use that on the side as well. I do that. And then testing can be done on Azure DevOps. It has a lot of capabilities that we use in FD and First Digital to facilitate our remote development. So Microsoft Teams is also very valuable to us. We use it in all meetings, in all ways we can. We even use it for some coding, which I saw the other day, a nice presentation where someone in our team has done some coding on Microsoft Teams with the apps in Power Apps or something like that. And it just expands on how we can use the tool, and people are excited in using it. So we use it for the stand-ups, scrums, requirement workshops. I record everything. I can always go back and listen to what the requirement was if I've omitted something, or I also like the recording, send it to business afterwards so that they can also have record, and you don't have to take meeting notes. So we just have these libraries of recorded meetings, recorded show and tells, recorded, everything is nicely recorded and then filed. So that's a very nice feature of Teams that we use all the time. So we also use it for information sharing, where we store documents on Teams in channels. And if you are familiar with how Teams work, is you can set up a channel, a project channel, and in the project channel you can store files, you can store these recordings, you can have discussions, and everything is just in one place if you need to reference, or if you need to go back and check something that you can't remember that has taken place. So that is how we use Teams. We use it rather extensively in First Digital. Most of our clients, or I can say 90% of our clients, like using Teams. So I think everyone's familiar with it. Business is happy using it. It's really been a very game changer tool in the industry. DevOps, Azure DevOps, we also use that extensively, as I said, for the backlog, dashboards, testing, release management. And I have mentioned, for anybody that does not know, that TFS and Azure DevOps is actually now just changed names. So Skype for Business, we also use Skype for Business when clients or customers do not have Teams, or their firewall is blocking it in some way because we're doing videos or whatever. So we are very happy to switch over to Skype for Skype to Business.
That's great. Thanks, Belinda. So anyway, let's hand over to Jazz, and let's have a look at a real live dashboard with regards to what Jazz has built and shown. So Jazz, maybe you want to just share your desktop, and let's give the audience a taster of what Azure DevOps can do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Scott. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Azure DevOps. Are you sure you want to share? Scott, could you please cancel your share at the moment? Ah, there we go. Okay. Just to touch on what Belinda was saying previously regarding teams. So she said that we can have channels that are dedicated to the project and what is scoped within the project. So this is a typical example for the live project that we are managing remotely currently. So all of our documentation sits within this channel, and everybody within the team has access to this documentation. This also functions as a way of version control. So, I mean, for example, we have done requirement analysis and gathering at the start of this particular project. And we have done version controls with Word documents for the mobile application functional specification. So just to go back. So concerning DevOps. Right, so when the client approached us with what it is that they wanted, the idea was to have a full end-to-end agile approach, touching on DevOps practices to help deliver on what we proposed was accomplishable within the project timeline. The approach aids us in managing client expectations in terms of progress through visualization, through bi-weekly check-ins. In other words, at the end of our 2-week sprints or 10-day sprints. It gives the client the opportunity to provide feedback and ensure our delivery is aligned with their expectations on a continuous basis. So bearing that in mind, we did do the acquiring and documentation of a functional requirement document. How that is then translated is into epics, features, and user stories in Azure DevOps for internal management and traceability throughout the software development lifecycle. So a typical example would be an epic being dedicated to a page within the app, for example, the About Us page. We have then gone and broken those requirements down in accordance with visitors and users that may be logged in. So we dedicate features to those requirements, and then we further refine them into the user stories. So basically, this is what Belinda was touching on earlier, where we have one big backlog that's dedicated to the requirements within the project. And then we take these and we move them into the sprints, which we have created at the start with the backlog. So it's just a simple case of taking a user story and dragging it into the sprint. And Bob's your uncle, there we go. So from here, once we have just decided what actually goes into the sprint, we will then move across to the Kanban board. And as you can see, we are sitting in sprint 2 currently. And all of those items that we have decided during sprint planning will go into this particular sprint, will sit in the to-do column. So developers are able to come through and pick up work here and move it along the board as we progress throughout the development lifecycle. So basically, at the moment, QA is running concurrently with development so that we can achieve these sprint deliverables that we set out in our sprint planning. So a developer will come along and he will pick up the work and he will move it into in progress. From there, he will say, okay, I've committed the work that I've done for these requirements, and he will move it into awaiting deployment. Basically, it's just a way for us to sort of gauge, you know, and differentiate between the types of work that we have done and the stuff that's still in progress. Once this work is then committed to QA for testing, we will move that across sorry, this is a live board. So Lazi, if you are on, don't worry too much about what I'm doing. He will say, okay, awaiting deployment. He pushes it to QA, and then he will drag and drop and ready for testing. Once it's sitting and ready for testing, QA will come along and they will pick up the work. It will move into testing in progress. So another nifty thing is that this is all real time. So as you are working with this board, you might see tasks moving up and down the board in accordance with where they should be sitting, which is quite cool. So then QA will come along, they will make sure that the requirement that is sitting inside this user story has met all of its acceptance tests, and then they will close it off for UAT. So if we go back to the backlog, sorry. We will see that a lot of these users, sorry, technical difficulties, don't know what's happening. We will see that a lot of these user stories have already been closed off for the first sprint. So these sprint goals have been set out at the beginning of the sprint, and then our main goal or purpose is to close these user stories off by the end of the sprint, so that we can then show the client what the progress is that has been made through this development lifecycle or through the sprint at hand. So basically everything mentioned contributes quite significantly to the overall delivery and ensuring customer satisfaction. We have found that having all these elements in place has helped the team to actively engage in conversations around development, quality, and achieving sprint deliverables or goals. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chaz. That's great. It looks like a fantastic tool as well. So no, good to see that. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Sure, no problem.
Linda, back over to you. I believe you're going to just talk about some of the results that an organization can achieve, as well as potentially some of the benefits.
Yeah, and just going back to my presentation. Is that visible?
Yes, it is. Okay,
so the results we achieved is good product releases. It works. The model that we are implementing with remote development or being at the office development, the results achieved is good product that we are releasing. We've achieved great success. Customers are happy with how we're delivering these projects. It's going rather well. Sound business relationships are built through the DevOps practice, sort of code saying that we need to get business closer to us, we need to collaborate with business more, which is very nice because business now feels that they're part of the development. It's not something happening over there and it's this mystical creature that just gives us something that we can use. They're part of the process, and that is also critical for the success of for product take on and user acceptance. So you're also taking care of that factor that's always a problem in projects where business says, what are you giving us? And now they're part of it, and it really works also well, and having those relationships built with business. Developer testing leads to less bugs, and that resource rotation of 1 week you dev, next week you fix bugs, and you support what you've built. That also helps the product becoming more robust quicker. We often find by sprint 3 or sprint 4 that we find less bugs because that focus is there to see, oh, I don't want someone else fixing my stuff. I'm going to really test this. I'm going to look at it. So that has been working quite well as well, in line with that DevOps practice. Structure that we're providing by that sprint 0 is where we're explaining how this whole structure is working to the customer, business, and the team. They know how the sprint structure works. They know that day 1 is this, day 2, day 3, day 4, this will happen. We even put that on a dashboard. So when they open the dashboard, they say, oh, I'm in day 3 of the sprint. This is what's happening today in day 3 of the sprint. Or I'm in day 7 of the sprint. We're commencing with testing, peer testing today, and we're going to document it. So it's just giving them that structure and providing the transparency to business, and they just can open the board anytime and see exactly what's happening. It gives them a comfortable feeling of knowing how this project is going and how the product is transpiring. Development, as I said, is now accessible to business. I find that in the projects that we are now doing is that I get Teams calls throughout the day, or a Teams chat, or an email, or some communication from business saying, just checking in, how are things going. So there's that open door policy between development and business now, which is that it's great, it's nice, it's making everything gel properly. So, and that is how you have a DevOps culture born, is by opening up the development team to your business, being very tentative and supportive, and having that extra support from QA and operations moving into your development cycle.
Great. So tell us about some customer stories.
So it's just case studies that I would like to discuss is that recently we had 3 very big customers where we had different products that we were implementing for them or developing for them. The one was we were forming part of the customer's team. It was a sort of the one that I explained in a previous slide, was the team was incorporated into their teams. And we just did some CRM system maintenance and some new features, and our team handled the business as usual as this customer then took on a new CRM that they were developing, and that the in-house team took care of that, and we took care of the business as usual. So that was quite a challenging thing to take on, as we first had to understand their business, understand the CRM, how is it working. So that took a lot of analysis as well, and the product owner being very involved in getting the team up to speed in what that product does. A new development application that we started fairly recently. It's totally remote. We have everything on Teams and on Azure DevOps. There's no physical sort of meetings that's ever happened, and this project is going really, really well. We have a K25 development, and if you're not familiar with that, that is a low-code development. It's a lot of modules that you choose from, and that's also totally remote. Also in this time, this particular customer also has everyone off-site, working off-site, and there is no physical interaction with them, and that's just also working beautifully for us. It's just flowing. And the teams that we usually put together, or the teams in these sprints that we put together, is typically your software engineers. And I've said this so many times, we have a team lead, QA testers, operational and support engineers, product owners, and the stakeholders is part of our team. So everyone knows the stakeholders. The developer knows exactly who person A, B, and C in business is, so that if the product owner for some reason cannot have that contact, it's familiar to them as well. So we have our typical 10-day sprints. It can be a longer sprint if a client or customer needs to have a longer sprint. I know some customers like 4-week sprints. So we are adaptable in how we can sprint. It's not set in stone, but our comfortable when we execute projects, it's usually a 10-day sprint. And I have said that the day 1 would be backlog grooming, 6 or 7 days of development, 1 or 2 days of development testing, 1 day sprint closeout, and retrospectives. The tools and practices we use is I've said that many times now.
Linda, sorry to interrupt you. We've got a question from the audience based on the team within those case studies. One of the questions is, where is the business analyst in the structure, or is the product owner the BA?
Yeah, so in Agile, you typically don't have, how you work in sprints is you'll have a product owner, which is a hybrid of your business analyst and project or product management. And you'll also have a hierarchy of a product manager in there. In some instances, how bigger the projects are. So the product owner typically in our environments will look after the product and project and make sure that these requirements are taken care of. Okay, so to get back to the presentation, I've said the tools and practices, DevOps practices, Agile methodology, Scrum framework. We leverage all of those three for our project implementations. Azure DevOps application, we use that for the backlog and to check how the project is commencing and just flowing and going on. We use the Microsoft Teams application for collaboration and storing of documents, SharePoint and Skype, traditional SharePoint as well, and Skype. So everything with the cloud, safe to SharePoint anyway. So it's also always accessible from wherever you are. So you can access it from your mobile phone, particularly Teams as well. If you have Teams downloaded on your mobile phone, you can also have your meetings from your mobile phone. You can answer calls on your mobile phone. So you don't have to be in front of your computer, literally, or in front of your laptop to have these interactions. Stand-ups and scrums. We have these sprint team stand-ups every morning and every afternoon. We have a check-in. And then the business stand-ups, and I think I have not mentioned this before, is where the business stand-ups also happen in the sprints. I will schedule 3 business stand-ups. One will be on day 2 of the sprint, where I'll have a check-in with business to say, we've had our backlog grooming. The team has had the backlog grooming. These user stories has made it into this sprint, and we'll just discuss what's going to be developed in the sprint so that business is aware. Then we'll have a second check-in on day 5 of the sprint, is usually the Friday, I think. Do 4 or 5, we'll have a checking with business to just discuss any impediments that is happening or any clarity that's required that they did not get to or provide us with that communication. We will probably shoot off in the discussion section of Azure DevOps. And then on the closeout is on day 10, we'll have a show and tell scheduled with business where we demonstrate to them what was developed in that sprint, and then we'll have another space in time where the business can say love it or not liking the color or whatever, and we note down if we need to change anything or if it was not in line with what the thoughts were when we gathered the requirements. So that's how the show and tells will then also be recorded. We take notes of it, and then we start the next sprint the following week on the Monday. So the requirements workshops also happen on Teams. I mentioned that also many times before when we have that recorded. And that is basically how we just, in this case study, show how we have all of these points and checkpoints in to just deliver this product. The documentation that we use or do, and this is where the BA/product owner part comes in, is where we do that business requirement specification baseline from the requirement workshops. We have a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 before sprints commence, so that we have an idea of exactly what is it that they want us to deliver. They might not have the detail, but it's just a baseline where we build from to ask the questions to get the requirements onto the backlog. So we have sprint closeout documents. Sprint closeout documents I will send out every Friday of the sprint closeout, where I document changes that happen in the sprint. I document risks, impediments. I document, for instance, if there's anything that we need to park and put into a next sprint. This is an annexure to that BRS baseline so that we can just show what was delivered in that sprint. And it's just sort of a document thread. and business has proof of what's been happening, and for auditing purposes as well. Then a functional requirement specification, we also provide that at the end of your project, where we will pull everything together from what was on the backlog, what the baseline requirements was, what the sprint documentation was, and we'll compile it and put a functional requirement document together for the customer to close out our project. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Belinda. Belinda and Jazz, thank you so much. I mean, that was just an amazing session and fantastic information for everybody on the call. I just want to take a pause quickly just to see, do we have any further questions from everybody on the call today? Please, if you do have any questions, just post that in the Q&A section on your webinar side. Okay, looks like we're good to go. No pending questions, but I'm sure if anybody has anything, you can certainly pop that into the survey after the webinar, and we'll certainly pick that up with you at a later stage. So yeah, I mean, from our side, a very big thank you for sharing your time with us today. I know, you know, we definitely are competing with a lot of webinars today that people are being invited to. So we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. That brings us to the end of the session today. I hope you've gained some insights to assist you and your organization. And I hope it was extremely valuable for you. And we're certainly looking forward to you joining us for future webinars as we send them out on a regular basis. Once again, from Belinda, Jasmine, and myself, thank you so much again. We wish you well, and we hope you have a great day further. Thank you.